the problem will still remain until we stand up for the weakest, in our society. And sometimes the weakest can even be a racist mother with a child on a tram where she's in a minority amongst people who are mostly immigrants. And that's the situation that many people in the inner cities of this country find themselves in. And that's why you will always have a problem of racism where there's poverty and a problem with the educational system. Because where you've got immigration coming in, it's not in the incentive, there's no incentive for the government to put in an educational system that encourages critical thinking, because they want to keep they want a situation where people will always know less than economists and politicians. You know, it's not a conspiracy, but it is a community of interest between different groups who want cheap labour and who want a pliant political situation to their advantage. So think for yourselves whether you're racist or you're anti-racist, multicultural or nationalist. I would encourage people to try and draw a consensus and bring together the ideas of pan-European nationalism with social democracy. You know, as Thilo Sarrazin said in Germany, he wrote a book on social democracy where the problems of integrating people into Western society and Western civilization are very different between different groups. You know, he focused on Islamic immigration, of course, because of the Turkish population in Germany and also the Arabian population in Germany as not integrated, right? But the point with Thilo Sarrazin's title of his book was Germany, the first country to do away with itself. But Germany isn't alone. As England is doing away with itself, it's giving up the commercial areas of its country. If you look at some areas of Britain, the shops, the small, medium enterprises are being taken by non-English people. And whose fault is that really? Although immigration was never democratically put to a referendum, the government brought in cheap labour. The unions were undercut. The power of the unions was undercut. The Conservatives may have brought in immigration policy because they believe in an imperial project divided by class and race. But also the social democratic parties and the liberal parties in this country, and also the people with communist sympathies as well, have to take their share of the blame as well, because they supported and entrenched that policy of making people not guests, workers, but trying to put down roots, and that is colonisation. And when you've got people who will say that in Western imperialism, where it brought Western values, Western technology to the third world, was completely immoral, they will at the same time say that it's completely moral for people from the third world to come to this country and settle, put down roots, have their families, and compete against the native population. You know, the indigenous English population and European population, if you're talking about the European Union as a whole. So what the only answer is for English people to become much more savvy about economics and business. So for them to make their own businesses, perhaps on the or loose cooperatives, you know, because small businesses or chains of businesses based simply on capitalism are not going to work, because they will be undercut by the forces of the market and immigration. The only way to solve this problem, and for people not to get so frustrated that they shout on trams and abuse people or be abusive through their foul language and swearing, is to give them a future. If you put people in a corner, they will start to fight back. That's what that woman was articulating, right? But the case is that her son and many other people like them who are young families are being denied housing. Some of that housing, it's a fact, will go to immigrant families, right? It's not the main thing because there are a million abandoned houses in Britain. There's not a shortage of housing. It's a thing in economics called unobtainable surplus, where the price is too high for a surplus that is created by capitalism to be achieved, to be used, and therefore that surplus goes to waste. So, although you might think that a woman shouting and acting irrationally, it might seem, on a tram, is a cut and dry thing. You know, she was abusive to people, so she must be punished. But that is not rational, that is not logical. You know, she wasn't violent. She didn't apply her politics to violence. She was giving a critique of the system that we live in and a system that is starting to break down. When you see thievery by people from not just New World Order crime families, the mafia, Colombian drug cartels, the ones that are more widely known about, from firms in London to Liverpool and Glasgow, you know, tooling up and fighting each other over drugs. You know, there is many scales of organised crime. And you've had organised crime by the banks who have stole trillions of pounds from the system. The only way to alleviate economic and social pressures to make ourselves more socially cohesive is not only to deal with the problem of debt, that is to eradicate debt, give the money back to the people, and there may be some inflation from that, but also to solve racial problems, you know? People, ethnic groups in this country believe it is now their right to impose their will on the native English population. And why do they believe that? Because they've been given a signal by government that that is acceptable and that is law abiding, right? You know, it's not exclusively an English country anymore. Okay? It is a multicultural country. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to change. I'm not saying that it's almost immoral that there is colonisation of our own country going on. We have colonised people, and the moral relativist argument is, you know, what goes around comes around, and we just have to accept it. But there are ways to make social cohesion and develop and inculcate Western values into the people who are on that tram shouting that woman down as she was trying to shout them down. You got to this hardened positions that crystallise to the point where there can be no agreement. Government has to step in, you know, and say that we won't tolerate violence, but also we won't shut down people's maybe frustrated and foul-mouthed attempts at political dialogue. So I believe that there should be a common European Union policy of keeping the immigration rate at 4% of the birth rate of the European population, and eventually over time that can be reduced until the people who we have brought into the European Union and England become westernised, they intermingle with the population, and eventually racially European cohesive continent is achieved. And from there we can build links with the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand to become a Western world with perhaps a Western currency. You know? But I've thought that this woman's shouting on a tram just highlights all the problems that we face as a society, the different currents that are going on in our society for good or bad.